Jack stood by the towering windows of his penthouse office, gazing out over the bustling skyline of Manhattan. The city stretched before him, vibrant and full of life, just like the empire he had built from the ground up. Co-company had become synonymous with luxury, a brand that catered to the elite but was created with the intention of being accessible to everyone. From the very beginning, Jack had envisioned Co-company as a place where anyone, regardless of background or status, could experience the finest in fashion and elegance. Yet, despite all of his success, a shadow lingered in Jack's mind. He had always prided himself on being involved in every detail of the business, from product development to customer experience, but recently whispers had reached his ears that made him uneasy. Rumors had started to circulate about discrimination occurring in one of his flagship stores, the SoHo location, one of the crown jewels of the company. This store, managed by the talented James, had consistently been one of the most profitable branches. However, something was amiss. Jack turned away from the window and sat at his sleek mahogany desk, his mind drifting back to the conversation that had planted the seed of doubt. It had been Luca, one of his most senior employees, who first approached him with concerns. Luca wasn't the type to stir up unnecessary trouble. She had been with Co-company since its earliest days and had earned Jack's trust through years of hard work and loyalty. In the middle of a quiet afternoon, Jack found himself in a conference room, its large windows flooding the space with sunlight. Across from him sat Luca, one of the longest-serving employees at the SoHo flagship store. Her usual calm demeanor seemed slightly off today. Jack could sense something was troubling her, and as a leader he knew to pay attention when a seasoned employee like Luca asked for a private meeting. Luca wasn't one to complain or stir drama without good reason. "Jack, there's something I need to talk to you about." "It's about James," Luca began, her voice soft but steady. Jack immediately sat up straighter. James had been the manager of the SoHo store for years, and under his leadership, it had become one of Co-company's most profitable locations. Jack had always trusted James, but hearing his name in this context made him uneasy. Luca hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I've noticed. Well, more than noticed, I've seen how he treats certain customers. People who don't look like they belong in the store. He's selective, let's say. If someone comes in who doesn't fit the luxury image James has in his head, he gives them the cold shoulder. It's subtle, but I've seen it happen enough times now that I felt I had to tell you." Jack frowned slightly. This wasn't the first time he had heard whispers of something being off at the SoHo store, but this was the first time a trusted employee had brought it to him directly. "Are we talking about a general attitude issue, or do you think it's something more?" Jack asked, his tone cautious but firm. He needed to know if this was a matter of personality or something deeper, like racial or class-based discrimination. Luca sighed, a weight seeming to lift off her shoulders just by being able to voice her concerns. "Look, I don't want to say James is doing it deliberately to be cruel, but the patterns are there. He's especially distant or outright dismissive with customers of color. I've seen him brush off Latino and Black customers as if they don't belong in a store like Co-company. I don't think he even realizes how obvious it is sometimes. And it's not just about race, but anyone who doesn't dress the part, or who looks like they can't afford to be in the store. It's like they don't exist to him." Jack felt a knot form in his stomach. Co-company had been built on the idea that luxury should be accessible, that everyone deserved to experience something beautiful, regardless of their background. The thought that someone in his company, especially someone as high up as James, might be undermining that philosophy was disturbing. He ran a hand across his face, thinking carefully before responding. "I appreciate you bringing this to me," Luca, Jack said finally, his voice quiet but resolute. "You've worked with us long enough to know that this is the exact opposite of what we stand for." "Did James ever explicitly say anything, or is it more about how he acts?" Luca shook her head. "No, he's not the type to say anything out loud. But actions speak louder than words, right? It's the way he interacts with people, the way he decides who gets his attention and who doesn't. It's like he's made up his mind about certain people before they even get the chance to show who they are." Jack leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Luca's concerns couldn't be brushed aside. Even if James didn't mean to be overtly discriminatory, the mere fact that his behavior could be perceived this way was a problem, and a big one. "Thank you for telling me this," Jack said, looking Luca in the eye. "I'll handle it from here, but I need you to keep an eye on things in the meantime. If you notice anything else, anything at all, I want to know immediately." Luca nodded, relief evident on her face. "Of course, Jack. I just want to make sure Co-Company stays the kind of place we all believe in." As Luca left the room, Jack sat in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. If what she said was true, if James was really behaving in a way that went against everything Co-Company stood for, then Jack would have to take action. But first, he needed to see for himself. He couldn't afford to jump to conclusions, but neither could he afford to let such a serious issue slide. Jack steeled himself. This wasn't just about one employee's behavior, this was about the soul of the brand he had worked so hard to build. And he would do whatever it took to protect it. The warning from Luca lingered in Jack's mind like a persistent shadow. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. And as much as he trusted Luca, he needed to see the truth for himself. Jack knew he couldn't walk into the SoHo store as the CEO and expect the truth to reveal itself. People behaved differently when they knew the boss was watching. He needed to approach this carefully, and so he began his investigation quietly and discreetly. Jack's first step was reaching out to other employees from the SoHo store. In casual conversations, he asked questions about the store's environment and subtly about James' behavior. Some employees were hesitant to speak openly, clearly aware of the delicate nature of the subject. Others, however, seemed relieved to finally have a chance to voice their concerns. While none of them came forward with direct accusations, several mentioned noticing that James treated certain customers differently, those who didn't fit the store's stereotypical image of wealth and luxury. One younger employee, Hannah, had told him in a hushed tone, "I've seen it a few times. People who come in wearing more casual clothes, or who don't look like they belong, James kind of ignores them or doesn't offer the same level of service. It's uncomfortable to watch, honestly." Jack took mental notes but kept his expressions neutral, not wanting to tip his hand too early. What disturbed him most was that while none of the employees had witnessed anything overtly racist, the trend of differential treatment was undeniable. The patterns matched what Luca had described, and it appeared that James was, intentionally or not, perpetuating the kind of elitism Jack had tried to avoid. However, Jack knew that relying on second-hand accounts wasn't enough. He needed to see it for himself. That's when he decided to go undercover, to experience firsthand how James treated someone who didn't fit the luxurious mold he expected. On a chilly afternoon, Jack dressed himself in a simple, worn-out jacket, jeans, and an old pair of sneakers. His goal was to blend in as a regular customer, someone who didn't scream luxury. He even went as far as applying a bit of makeup to make his skin tone appear slightly darker, hoping to see if James' behavior shifted based on race, as Luca had implied. With his disguise in place, Jack made his way to the SoHo store. The decision to disguise himself as an average customer was not one Jack made lightly. He knew if he wanted to truly understand the nature of James' behavior, he couldn't simply rely on reports from others. He needed to experience it for himself. So on a chilly Friday morning, Jack ditched his usual tailored suits and luxury watches. Instead, he slipped into a simple, faded hoodie, a pair of worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers. His appearance was drastically different from his usual polished look, and that was exactly the point. As Jack made his way to the SoHo store, he rehearsed the role in his mind. Today, he wasn't Jack, the CEO of Co-Company. He was just another potential customer, a man who might appear out of place in one of New York's most exclusive shopping districts. Stepping through the sleek glass doors of the SoHo store, Jack immediately felt a difference in the atmosphere. The sales associates were present, but none of them approached him, not even with a casual greeting. He spotted James near the back, busying himself with what looked like a minor inventory check. Jack made his way over to the accessories section, pretending to examine a few high-end belts. He kept an eye on James, curious to see how he'd be treated. James finally glanced in Jack's direction, and in that brief moment, his expression shifted from casual professionalism to disinterest. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The dismissiveness was clear. Jack was being judged, whether for his outfit or something else. Jack wasn't entirely sure yet. James continued to ignore Jack for several minutes. A few other customers entered the store, two of them impeccably dressed in designer clothing. James' demeanor immediately changed. He quickly moved toward them, greeting them with a charming smile and offering assistance without hesitation. Jack watched from the corner of his eye as James lavished attention on the new arrivals, praising their selections and suggesting additional items with enthusiasm. The contrast in his behavior was glaring. Jack decided to push the situation further. He approached the counter, picking up a luxury leather wallet, and asked, "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this piece?" James barely looked at him, his tone flat and uninterested. "It's one of our premium leather wallets. You can find the details on the price tag." Jack nodded, feigning ignorance, and asked, "Is there a payment plan available?" The question seemed to irritate James, who shot him a dismissive glance. "We don't really offer payment plans for items like that. It's best if you check with your bank about financing." The way James delivered the words, so thinly veiled in condescension, made it clear he had already made up his mind about Jack's financial status. To him, Jack was just another window shopper, someone who couldn't possibly afford to buy anything in the store.
But it wasn't just about the money. Jack could feel it in James' tone, the unspoken judgment based on appearance, and likely the slight darkening of his skin from the makeup Jack had used. Jack felt a surge of anger. The store, his store, was meant to be a place of inclusion, a sanctuary where anyone could feel welcomed and respected. And here was James, a man he had trusted, undermining that very foundation with subtle, elitist discrimination.
Jack placed the wallet back on the counter, biting back the urge to confront James right then and there. This wasn't the time. He needed to maintain his cover for now. Jack gave James a curt nod and quietly left the store. As he stepped outside, the cold air hit him, but it wasn't nearly as chilling as what he had just witnessed inside. Jack's suspicions had been confirmed. James was, in fact, treating customers based on their appearance, dismissing those he deemed unworthy of luxury. This wasn't just an issue of poor customer service, it was a deeper, more insidious problem of discrimination that Co-Company could not afford to tolerate. Jack's blood boiled as he walked down the street. There was no question about it now, James needed to be held accountable. But how he approached this next step was crucial. He couldn't simply storm in with accusations. If James was to have any chance at redemption, Jack had to confront him in a way that forced him to reflect, to understand the consequences of his actions. Only then could there be any hope of change. The time for quiet observation was over. Tomorrow, Jack would return to the SoHo store, but this time he wouldn't be hiding behind a disguise. He would come as himself, the CEO, and James would have to face the consequences of his choices.
James, who had been speaking to a well-dressed couple near the entrance, looked up and froze. His face paled when he saw Jack, recognizing him instantly, though the memory of their encounter the day before was likely rushing back in vivid detail. The casual dismissal James had shown Jack while he was in disguise would now come back to haunt him, and Jack could see the realization dawn in James' eyes. There was no way to hide from what was coming.
Jack walked directly toward James, his expression calm but firm. The other executives hung back, giving Jack the space to handle this confrontation on his own. James shifted nervously, a flicker of panic in his eyes as he tried to gather himself. "James," Jack began, his voice steady. "Let's talk in your office." James hesitated for a moment, but then nodded silently, leading Jack toward the back of the store. Inside the small office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. James closed the door behind them and stood by his desk, fidgeting with his hands as if trying to prepare for what he knew was inevitable. Jack wasted no time. "Do you remember me from yesterday, James?" James opened his mouth, his voice shaky. Yes, I do, sir. I didn't realize it was you. I thought. You thought I was just some random customer who didn't belong in your store, didn't you?" Jack's tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the disappointment and anger behind his words. "You dismissed me, made assumptions about who I was based on how I looked. Tell me, how often do you do that? How many customers have you treated this way because you decided, just by looking at them, that they weren't worthy of your attention?" James swallowed hard, his eyes flickering with fear. He tried to find the right words, but nothing he said could undo the truth of what had happened. "Sir, I didn't mean anything by it, I swear. It was just, I thought. You thought I wasn't rich enough? Not stylish enough? Not the kind of person you wanted representing Co-Company?" Jack's voice grew sharper now, cutting through James' weak excuses. This company was built on the idea that everyone deserves to experience luxury. It doesn't matter how they look, what they wear, or how much money you think they have. Everyone who walks into this store deserves to be treated with respect. James' face flushed with shame. I'm sorry, Jack, I made a mistake. I didn't realize how wrong I was. Jack didn't let up. This isn't just about yesterday. I've spoken with other employees, and they've seen it too. You've been doing this for a while, haven't you? Picking and choosing who gets your attention, who gets to feel welcomed here. Luca warned me about it. And I've heard from others that you've been especially dismissive toward customers of color. James' eyes widened, and he quickly shook his head. No, that's not true. I've never. Stop. Jack held up a hand, silencing him. This isn't about defending yourself. You've already shown me who you are. You've failed to uphold the values of this company. We are not a place that turns people away because of how they look. That kind of behavior is toxic, and it's damaging everything we stand for. James' voice trembled as he spoke, desperation creeping into his words. I'm sorry, Jack. I really am. I see now how wrong I've been. I'll change, I swear. Just, please give me a chance to make it right. Jack sat across from James in the small, tense office, the weight of his decision clear in the air. It would have been easy to fire James on the spot for what he had done, for how he had treated customers and tarnished the reputation of Co-Company. But Jack knew that this was about more than just James. It was about creating a culture of growth and accountability. Still, James needed to understand the gravity of his actions, and that this would be his final warning. James, I'm not going to fire you, Jack began, keeping his voice measured, but firm. But let me be clear, what you've done is unacceptable. You've created an environment where customers are judged based on their appearance or status, and that goes against everything this company stands for. If I ever hear of this happening again, you won't get another chance. This is it. James, his head hanging low, nodded quickly. I understand, Jack. I really do. I made a huge mistake, and I'm truly sorry. I don't know what I was thinking, but I want to make it right. Jack leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with James to ensure his next words sank in. Sorry won't be enough. From now on, you're going to take real, actionable steps to change the way you approach your job and the way you treat people. Starting immediately. You'll be enrolled in a comprehensive training program on customer service and diversity. You need to relearn what it means to serve every customer who walks through those doors, no matter who they are or what they look like. James's shoulders sagged with the weight of his responsibility, but there was a glimmer of resolve in his eyes. I'll do it, Jack. I'll commit to the training. I want to be better. I want to prove that I can change. Jack gave a slight nod, satisfied with James's willingness to take ownership of his actions, but knowing that talk was cheap, actions would be the true test. Good. This training is just the beginning. You'll be monitored closely from now on. I'm giving you a chance to rebuild trust with me, with the employees, and most importantly, with the customers. But understand this: if you slip again, if you so much as give off a hint of the same behavior I've seen and heard about, you're gone. Do you understand? James nodded fervently. Yes, sir. I won't let you down. I'm going to work hard to change. I hope so, Jack said, standing up and signaling the end of the conversation. We've built Co-Company on respect, inclusion, and creating a space where everyone can experience luxury. You'll be a part of that, or you won't be here at all. James stood as well, his posture more humble than it had been since Jack entered the office. I appreciate the chance, Jack. I know I've got a long way to go, but I'm committed. With that, Jack left the office, the door closing softly behind him. He felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders, but also a sense of cautious optimism. He had seen people change before, and if James was truly willing to put in the work, there was hope. Later that day, Jack met with the HR department and finalized the details of the training program James would undergo. It wasn't just a basic course, it was an intensive education on how to embrace diversity, recognize unconscious bias, and provide an exceptional customer experience to every individual. The program would hold James accountable at every step, ensuring that he didn't just go through the motions, but truly internalize the values that Jack held dear. As Jack walked out of the building and into the busy Manhattan streets, he felt a sense of resolve. The road ahead was long, not just for James, but for Co-Company as a whole. Jack knew that if the company was going to truly live up to its mission, this would only be the beginning of broader changes across all their stores. The lesson James would learn now was one that needed to be instilled in every employee under Co-Company's roof. In the end, Jack had given James a chance at redemption. Whether he would rise to the occasion and make the changes necessary was up to him. But Jack was ready to hold him accountable, every step of the way. With the situation surrounding James addressed, Jack knew the changes couldn't stop with just one man. The company itself needed to evolve, to fully embody the values it had always stood for: inclusion, respect, and accessibility for all. Jack realized that a single training session wouldn't suffice. It was time for a company-wide transformation. Jack immediately set to work, calling meetings with Co-Company's top leadership to outline his vision for the future. "We can't allow any form of discrimination, no matter how subtle, to exist within our walls," he told them. His words were met with nods of agreement, but Jack pressed further. "We need to make it clear from the top down that Co-Company is for everyone. It's not enough to simply say we value diversity, we need to actively cultivate it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and execution. Jack worked closely with HR and outside consultants to design a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program that would reach every corner of the company. It wasn't just about customer service training anymore, it was about rethinking the company's culture from the ground up. The program included mandatory workshops for all employees, from sales associates to executives, focusing on understanding unconscious bias, fostering an inclusive environment, and learning how to better serve a diverse clientele. Jack also ensured that leadership received additional coaching on how to lead inclusively and set the tone for the rest of the company. Jack wasn't content with just training, though. He wanted to create a lasting impact that would ripple through the entire organization, so he began incorporating new hiring practices that prioritized diversity. He also established a feedback system where employees and customers alike could anonymously report any instances of discrimination or exclusion, ensuring that such issues would be addressed swiftly and transparently. At the SoHo store, the changes were already being felt. James, having completed his initial training, was determined to prove that he could change. His behavior became a model for what Jack hoped to see across all Co-Company stores. James greeted every customer with warmth and genuine interest, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. He took the time to make each person feel welcome, a stark contrast to the attitude he had once displayed. The effects were almost immediate. Customers began to notice the difference in the store's atmosphere. It was more inviting, more inclusive, and the word quickly spread. People who had once felt unwelcome at Co-Company were returning, feeling as though they finally had a place in the luxury brand's world. The morale among the staff also improved as they saw their manager leading by example and treating every customer with respect. James, though still adjusting to his new role, found himself surprised by how much the change affected him. At first, the training had felt like a punishment, a chore he had to endure to keep his job. But as he embraced the lessons and applied them, he realized how much more fulfilling it was to treat everyone equally. The tension he had once carried, the need to judge and exclude, was replaced by a sense of pride in serving all customers with fairness. He wasn't just working for Co-Company anymore, he was working to make the brand better for everyone. Jack watched this transformation from a distance, pleased with the progress but aware that there was still much work to be done. The SoHo store was just one part of a much larger puzzle, and Jack knew that rolling out these changes across every store in the company would take time. But he was committed, determined to see it through, no matter how long it took. The cultural shift at Co-Company was beginning to take root. Customers who had once felt alienated were now spreading the word, and Jack could feel the winds of change blowing through his company. He knew this wasn't just about improving the bottom line, this was about fulfilling the vision he'd had from the very beginning, creating a brand where luxury wasn't defined by exclusion, but by the quality of the experience offered to everyone. As Co-Company continued to evolve, Jack remained vigilant. He held regular check-ins with store managers and employees, ensuring that the lessons from the training sessions were being applied consistently. He also expanded the company's diversity initiatives, creating a dedicated team tasked with ensuring that Co-Company continued to lead the industry in inclusivity, and fairness. In the end, the transformation of Co-Company wasn't just about fixing past mistakes, it was about building a future where every customer, regardless of who they were, could walk into a store and feel like they belonged. Jack had started that journey with one store, but he knew the real impact would come when every Co-Company store across the globe reflected those same values. The work was far from over, but Jack was optimistic. The changes were already making a difference, and he was determined to see Co-Company become the brand it was always meant to be, a place where luxury and inclusivity went hand in hand. Jack sat quietly in his office, reviewing the recent reports from the SoHo store. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Customers were commenting on how the atmosphere had changed, how they felt more welcome and respected. Employees, too, were noticing the shift in James. He was engaging with every customer, no matter how they looked or what they wore, and his demeanor had shifted from cold indifference to warm professionalism. The reports gave Jack a sense of satisfaction, but he knew this was only the beginning. It had been months since James started his training, and Jack had watched him closely throughout the process. Today, as Jack prepared to meet with him again, he felt a sense of cautious optimism. James had shown real progress, but Jack was well aware that change, especially this deep, was a continuous journey. James entered the room, looking more confident than he had during their last meeting, but there was still a humble air about him. He had learned a lot, and the weight of his past mistakes was still visible in his eyes. "James," Jack began, his tone neutral but firm. "I've been monitoring your progress closely, and I'm pleased with what I've seen. The changes you've made at the SoHo store haven't gone unnoticed. Customers are feeling more welcome, employees are happier, and the store is performing better because of it. You've done well." James exhaled softly, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over him. "Thank you, Jack. That means a lot coming from you. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm committed to continuing this journey. I've learned so much about myself, about how I was treating people without even realizing it. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to make things right." Jack nodded, appreciating James's humility. But he knew this wasn't the time for easy congratulations. "You've come a long way, James, but let's be clear, this is just the beginning. The real test isn't in how much progress you've made in the last few months. It's in maintaining that progress over the years. This isn't just about you. It's about the entire culture of Co-Company. We're not going back to the way things were." James straightened up, his face reflecting the seriousness of Jack's words. "I understand, Jack. I'm ready to keep improving, to make sure the store stays a place where everyone feels welcome." Jack leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with James. "I'm giving you a second chance, but remember, this is your only second chance. If I ever hear that you've fallen back into old habits, there won't be another conversation like this. The company has no room for discrimination, subtle or otherwise." James nodded firmly, the weight of Jack's words settling in. "I won't let you down. I've learned my lesson, and I promise you things will only get better from here." Jack sat back in his chair, satisfied with James's response. "Good. I believe you, James, but like I said, this is just the beginning. You've earned your second chance, and now it's up to you to prove every day that you deserve it." As James left the office, Jack turned back toward the large windows, his eyes drifting over the city. The skyline was as bright and bustling as ever, but Jack felt a quiet sense of peace. The changes at the SoHo store were a positive sign, but Jack knew the journey to transform Co-Company into a truly inclusive and welcoming brand was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more hard conversations, and more moments where difficult decisions had to be made. But for the first time in a while, Jack felt hopeful. He believed in the changes that were happening, not just in James but across the company. The road ahead was long, but Jack knew that with persistence and commitment, Co-Company would become the brand he had always envisioned, one where luxury wasn't defined by exclusion, but by the richness of experience and the inclusivity of every customer who walked through its doors. As the sun began to set over the Manhattan skyline, Jack stood at his window watching the city. He felt a quiet optimism about the future, knowing that this second chance wasn't just for James, it was for the company as a whole. The journey was far from over, but with each step forward, Co-Company was becoming the kind of brand Jack had always believed it could be. a brand where everyone, no matter who they were, could feel at home.